The first time I saw the man in the hat was one ordinary morning, as I was crossing the A616 towards Sheffield. The road was always a bit empty at dawn, especially along that stretch between the damp fields and the silent hills. It was raining lightly, and the truck's headlights barely cut through the thin mist. I was just about to come around a long bend when I saw him standing on the side of the road. Motionless. He was wearing a dark coat, black trousers, and an old-fashioned felt hat with a wide brim. He didn't move a muscle. He just stood there, staring at the approaching truck. I thought he was a farmer or some local waiting for help. But when I drove by slowly, I looked to the side, and he was staring straight at me. His dark, sunken eyes seemed dull. And what really gave me goosebumps was the fact that he didn't move, even with the noise of the truck passing by a few meters away. I kept driving, a little disturbed. When I looked in the rearview mirror, he was still there. Same position. Only now, without his hat. The place where he was standing seemed slightly sunken, as if the ground had given way beneath him. The next night, same time, same spot, he was there again. Same clothes, same posture. Only now, closer to the road. I stopped the truck a few meters away, got out with the flashlight and walked back. But there was no one there. Only the hat, thrown exactly where he had been. It was old, made of black felt, soaked with humidity. I picked it up instinctively, but when I touched it, it felt like I was touching a dead animal, cold, but with a strange weight, almost pulsating. I dropped it back to the ground and ran back to the truck. That night, I dreamed of a dark field. And the man. He walked slowly among the trees, always wearing a hat. And he looked directly at me, even though he had no face. I started avoiding that stretch, but the company kept putting me on the same route. The third night, he appeared again. Same place. Only this time, even closer to the road. Almost in the middle of the road. I braked right away, shining my headlights directly on him. And he didn't move. He just stood there. When I blinked, he disappeared. He evaporated into thin air. But the hat was on the hood. How it got there, I don't know. I got out, took it off and threw it in the bushes. But after that, things changed. I started seeing him in other places. In the rearview mirror. In the reflections of shop windows. Always standing. Always with the damn hat. Paranoia set in. It felt like he was following me. One night, I stopped to fill up at a 24-hour gas station near Barnsley. As I entered the convenience store, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I turned quickly. Outside, in the dim light of the street lamp, the man in the hat was standing across the road from me. The attendant noticed that I had stopped and asked if everything was okay. When I looked back, he was gone. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. But every time he appeared, something worse happened. I would lose control of the truck for seconds, see figures in the cab, hear banging on the bodywork. I even installed a dashcam and indoor cameras, trying to capture something. But every time he showed up, the recordings would get corrupted. Entire sections of video would disappear or return with static. Once, in the middle of a recording, I heard a voice that wasn't mine whisper, "You saw me. Now you know." After that, the file disappeared from the card. I started sleeping badly. I felt like I was being watched even at home. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway and found my own umbrella, which had been hanging on the back of the door, lying in the middle of the room. But I hadn't used it in months. An older coworker noticed I was acting strange and started talking to me. When I described the man, he turned white. He said that the one from the A616 had been seen by other drivers. One of them even quit his job after he started seeing the man off the road, in random places. The scariest thing is that they all reported the same pattern: presence on the road, gradual approach, and then appearances off the route. The common detail? The hat. It always appeared, on top of the truck, in the passenger seat, or even on the driver's lap. One night, I crossed the A616 for the last time. Not by choice. The road was closed and I had to swerve. And there he was. In the middle of the road. I didn't brake. I threw the truck up, honked, accelerated. When he passed, he didn't move. But he disappeared as soon as the headlights passed overhead. When I stopped the truck a few meters away, trembling, I went to check the front. Nothing. Just a hat. Intact. Dry. As if he had just come out of a shop. And when I got back into the cabin, he was sitting in the passenger seat. Staring straight ahead. No face. No sound. But his presence, dense. As if he had always been there. As if he were part of the truck. Part of the route. Part of me. Since that night, I've stopped fighting it. I've kept driving, making deliveries, crossing the A616 when I need to. But he keeps appearing. Sometimes just as a shadow on the side of the road. Sometimes closer. I've gotten used to checking the rearview mirror and seeing his hat resting on the passenger seat. I never try to talk to him. I never look directly at him for too long. I feel like if I stare at him for more than a few seconds, something inside me will break. It will make room for him to come in for good. I started to notice little things changing in me. Memory lapses. Sections of the road I don't remember driving. Towns I don't remember passing through. Sometimes I wake up in the truck already moving, without remembering when I started driving. And in those moments, he's never there. It's like he takes over. Like he takes control when I can't take it anymore. He always keeps me safe, but it gives me that feeling that I wasn't the one driving. That he's showing me the way. His way. One morning, I stopped in an open field, turned everything off, and left my hat on the asphalt. I waited. 4 hours. The sky began to lighten and nothing happened. I felt relieved. But when I got back into the cabin, there was another hat, identical, in the same place as always. As if I hadn't left anything behind. As if it were impossible to let go of it. And on the windshield, traces of a finger writing in the fog, not yet. As if it had been waiting. As if it knew the right moment. So if you're ever crossing the A616 in the early hours of the morning and see a man in a hat standing on the side of the road, don't stop. Don't honk. Don't stare too long. Because if he notices you've seen him, he might decide you're the next one to take the hat. Route 491 has always had a bad reputation among truckers. People disappear, trucks break down out of nowhere, and there are places where you can't even get a radio signal. But I never paid attention to those stories. Until that morning. I was cruising between Monticello and Blanding, Utah, when the storm started. It wasn't just rain, it was the kind of storm that makes you feel like the sky is going to fall. Lightning streaked across the sky, wind buffeted the truck, and the darkness was so thick that the headlights could barely make it through the water. The radio had gone silent hours ago. Not a sound. Just the sound of the storm. It was in the middle of this that it happened. Out of nowhere, a scream tore through the speakers. Loud, desperate. It was a woman's voice. And it wasn't just any voice. It was familiar. It was my sister's. The same intonation, the same way of pronouncing my name. But that didn't make sense. She was in another state. Sleeping at home. The scream repeated itself, followed by sobs and the phrase, "Help me, please, it's dark in here." I almost lost control of the steering wheel. I turned up the volume, but there was no station tuned in. The radio screen only showed a dash, as if there was no frequency at all. I slowed down, trying to understand. The sound became clearer. It wasn't a recording. It was live. She was talking scared, crying, saying she didn't know where she was, that she couldn't see anything. She asked me not to turn it off. But I hadn't turned it on at all. The radio was technically off. And yet, her voice came loud and clear, piercing through the storm. I tried to answer, but it was no use. She couldn't hear me. It was as if only her voice could get through. And then, out of nowhere, a second scream, louder, of pain. As if something had happened to her. I pulled over. I went out into the rain, trying to get a signal on my cell phone, to call home. Nothing. No service. I ran back, soaked to the skin. When I got in, the radio was dead again. But on the screen, a phrase flashed in red, "Do not let it go off." The off button was stuck. I tried to change the frequency, turn off the panel, but nothing responded. And then, the voice came back. But this time, it was mine. Myself, screaming. Calling for help. And that broke me. It was my own despair coming out of the speakers. But I had never said that. I had never felt that panic. Until that moment. I froze. The sound of my own voice begging for help, with a desperation I had never felt before, echoed through the cabin like a recording from the future. It said things I didn't understand: "Don't come in, don't stop, it's inside the radio." I tried to rationalize it, thinking it was some kind of interference, a prank, a hallucination caused by fatigue. But then I heard another sound. Behind me. Like someone had lightly tapped the wall of the truck. 3 sharp knocks. I turned around immediately, my heart in my throat. Nothing. But on the radio, my sister's voice came back. And she was screaming my name, over and over, until the static swallowed everything. The rain got heavier. The headlights started flashing on their own, and the engine stalled for a few seconds. The truck coughed, almost dying, even with a full tank of gas. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw for a second the back seat of the cab, and I swear there was a shadow sitting there. Not clear, but real enough to make me turn my head sharply. And when I looked again, there was nothing. But the air was heavy. Thick. Like something was inside me. The temperature suddenly dropped about 10 degrees, and my own breath started to smell, even with the heater on. I tried to keep going, my fingers shaking on the steering wheel. The radio oscillated between silence and whispers, and I began to notice that the screams changed. Sometimes it was my sister. Other times, my mother. Then, my own father, who had died years ago. Everyone was calling for help. Everyone was saying my name as if I were trapped in some invisible place. As if the radio were a door. A channel of communication with something that shouldn't exist. At one point, I heard them all at once. A chorus of despair. People I love, who shouldn't be there, crying out for help. And then, there was complete silence. No static. No wind. No rain. I looked around and the road was dry, as if it had never rained. The storm had disappeared in seconds. But the radio was still on. The screen showed a countdown. 0:05. I blinked, and it was already at 0:03. I didn't know what was going to happen. When it reached midnight, I heard one last sound, a sharp crack, as if something had broken inside the dashboard. And then, one last whisper, barely audible, "Now you're here too." The radio turned off by itself. And the truck, miraculously, went back to normal. As if nothing had happened. But I knew something remained. Inside the radio. Inside me. Since then, every time I drive through that area, I leave the radio off. I pulled out the fuse, removed the dashboard, but sometimes, it turns on by itself. Even without power. The screen flashes for a few seconds, and, on rare occasions, I hear a name. Mine. Or my sister's. It's happened in the middle of the day, with the sun shining brightly and the roads full of people. Always with that same tone of despair. I never spoke about it to anyone again. I even called my sister the next morning. She was fine. She slept through the night. But she told me something strange. She dreamed that she was screaming my name, trapped in a dark room. The truck still works. I replaced the radio. But the problem wasn't the radio. It was the channel. It was as if, that night, I had tuned into something I shouldn't have. A place between this world and another. A place where voices get stuck, repeating their last fears. I've tried to think rationally. Interfered frequency, hallucination. But every time I drive down this stretch of Route 491, something changes in the air. A heavy silence. A chill that runs up my spine. And sometimes, the echo of a distant scream, coming from nowhere. One morning, a fellow traveler told me that he once heard his daughter crying on the radio, and that she was also sleeping at home. Another said that he heard himself begging not to continue the journey. No one talks about it openly, but many have experienced something like that. Something that no one can explain. As if the storm opened a gap. As if the desert amplified what exists between the voices, or what is trapped behind them. And whoever hears it, is never the same again. So if you're ever cruising down Route 491 and a thunderstorm starts, turn off the radio. Leave it on silent. Because if it starts talking to you, maybe it's not just static. Maybe it's someone you love. Or worse, maybe it's you. It was around 3 a.m. when I took the Stockbridge bypass on my way back from a delivery in Leeds. I knew the road, but I always avoided driving along it at that time. There's something about that area that bothers me. The asphalt seems darker, the air heavier, and the streetlights, almost all off. Only the truck's headlights illuminated that empty road, surrounded by wet fields and low-lying fog. I was tired, but alert. And it was on a long bend, near one of those old viaducts, that I saw it. A shadow crossed the road. Fast. Fluid. Like thick smoke in the shape of a human. I slammed on the brakes instinctively. The truck skidded a little, but I managed to keep control. What chilled me inside was that I didn't see where the shadow went. It simply crossed and disappeared. It seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. And the strangest thing, there was no sound. Nothing. Not the noise of the tires or the engine. A dry, abnormal silence. I stood there for a few seconds in the middle of the road, with my hazard lights on. I looked at the field on both sides. Nothing. Just the headlights cutting through the fog. But when I turned my head back, the marks were there. On the inside of the windshield, 2 handprints appeared. As if someone had pressed them hard. Dusty. Thin, long, almost skeletal fingers. But I had cleaned the glass hours before. And I was alone. I reached out to wipe them away, thinking it might be condensation or dirt, but they wouldn't come off. They were marks like the ones left when someone touches something with dirty hands. And the shape wasn't normal. It didn't look human. The fingers were too long, asymmetrical, and they were positioned as if the creature had been leaning against it, looking directly at me. I turned on the windshield wipers and sprayed water, but nothing helped. The marks remained. I started to smell a strong smell of damp earth inside the cabin, even with everything closed. An old smell of something buried. And then, the radio, which was turned off, started to hiss by itself. A strange frequency, full of static, started to emit whispers. I couldn't understand everything, but a phrase repeated itself, faintly, as if coming from underwater. "Have you seen me?" It repeated over and over, while I accelerated to get out of there as quickly as possible. And, in the rearview mirror, I swear that for a second I saw the shadow in the back seat. Stopped. Just stopped. I tried to stay focused on the road, to ignore everything, but my eyes kept searching for the rearview mirror. And even when I couldn't see the shadow, I could feel it there. The temperature inside the cabin suddenly dropped, as if I had opened the door to a freezing cold environment. The sound of the engine seemed muffled, and for a few minutes I had the sensation that time had slowed down. The road never ended. It was like driving through an endless tunnel. The marks on the windshield began to expand, as if other hands were appearing out of nowhere, silently accumulating. Small marks, medium marks, large marks, all with the same deformed shape. I got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled the truck over to a bump in the road, turned off the engine, and got out to breathe. The air outside seemed lighter than the air inside the cabin. I walked to the front of the truck and looked at the windshield. The outside was clean. Impeccable. The marks were only on the inside. And none of them looked like they were made by me. I got back in, sat in the driver's seat, and felt something different on the steering wheel. As if it were damp. When I looked, I saw dark marks, as if someone had held it with clay hands. But I hadn't taken my hands off the wheel since the beginning of the trip. I turned on all the interior lights, trying to brighten the room, to see if there was anything there with me. But the more light I turned on, the darker the corner of the cabin seemed to get. As if the shadow was feeding on the attempt to drive it away. The radio turned on by itself again, this time on a clear frequency, playing an old recording. It was a male voice, British, very calm, saying, "It's not the road. It's what lives on it." The recording repeated this phrase 3 times, and then, absolute silence. And then, the lights flickered. And I saw, reflected in the side mirror, someone very tall standing next to the truck. Too tall. I didn't have the courage to open the door or look directly. I started the engine and drove off. The headlights illuminated the empty space. There was no one on the side. But the shadow in the back seat, it was there again. This time more clearly. As if it had been taking shape over time. And at that moment, the GPS froze. The screen went black, then blinked with a single word, "See." I turned everything off, accelerated, and only stopped hours later, at a well-lit gas station, with people nearby. When I got out, I looked at the windshield again. And the marks were gone. But the smell of earth remained. And every time I passed the Stockbridge bypass, the radio hisses. And the cabin lights blink. Always. I didn't tell anyone about it for a long time. Who would believe it? A tired trucker seeing shadows and hearing voices on the radio? But things didn't stop. Even far from the Stockbridge bypass, even in broad daylight, I sometimes see reflections that shouldn't be there. A figure in the windshield, a silhouette that crosses the road and disappears. And every time I wash the truck, after a few hours, opaque spots appear on the windshield. In the shape of a hand. Always on the inside. As if something is still with me. As if the shadow had never left. Another truck driver told me, out of the blue, that he thought that road was heavy. He said that once, in the winter, he saw a figure standing in the middle of the road that disappeared before he could brake. And then he found an old handkerchief stuck to the door handle, even though he had never gotten out of the vehicle. It was as if the road marked whoever passed by there. As if it chose. And once you see it, once you feel it, there is no going back. This is not called a hallucination. It is a memory. A memory that something saw you. And followed you. I've thought about leaving this life behind. But I can't. It's like something is pulling me back to the road. Every time I try to change route, something unexpected takes me back there. A flat tire, a GPS breaks, a client changes the destination. And always, somehow, I pass through Stockbridge again. Every time I pass, I wait for the moment when it will appear again. The shadow. The reflection. The hands. I don't know what it wants. But I know I'm not the only one. So if you ever drive along the Stockbridge bypass in the middle of the night and see something crossing the road, don't stop. Don't pull over. Don't look in your mirrors. Because the shadow only needs a second of your attention to enter. And after that, it will never leave. That night in Kansas was different from the beginning. Overcast skies, thick clouds, distant thunder, but not a drop of rain. I was driving along a nearly straight stretch of I-70, between two small towns that always gave me the creeps, the kind where if you blink, it's gone. Around 2 a.m., the headlights illuminated only the asphalt and the empty fields, devoid of life. No streetlights, no animals, just the dry wind blowing against the bodywork. That's when I saw it, a blue light cutting through the sky. It wasn't lightning. It was continuous, soft, but bright, as if someone had pointed a spotlight from above. And it was moving. I tried not to pay attention at first. My mind starts playing tricks on me after so many hours of driving. But the light came back. This time it was lower, closer. It came from the right, slowly crossed in front of the truck, and disappeared into the field on the left. The radio, which had been muted, hissed. The dashboard light blinked. And I, without even realizing it, turned the steering wheel. I left the road. Not abruptly, as if it were the most natural movement in the world. As if I had been pulled. Before I knew it, I was on a dirt road, the truck going slowly on its own, without my having decided to. I couldn't understand what I was doing. I just kept going. The field was open, the vegetation low, and that blue light appeared again, standing over a clearing. As if it was waiting for me. When I got closer, time stopped. I can't explain it any other way. The hands of the truck's clock froze. The wind stopped. The temperature went static. And the sound disappeared. Everything around me was still. As if someone had pressed pause on the world. And in the middle of that clearing, where the blue light was concentrated, there was a circle on the ground. Perfectly drawn, burned into the earth. I got out. The tires made no noise when I stepped on them. There was no sensation of ground beneath my feet. It was as if I were walking on nothing. The blue light hovered above me, pulsing slightly, as if it were breathing. And inside the circle, there were objects. Small ones. A broken wristwatch. A child's shoe. An open wallet with an old document. Things that shouldn't be there. Things that seemed forgotten by time. And the strangest thing, every time I tried to leave the circle, I felt like I was going back to the same place. I turned around, and the truck was still in front of me. Motionless. Waiting. I stood there, staring at the truck, trying to understand how everything could be still and wrong at the same time. When I got back to the cab, the clock hands started moving again, but backwards. First slowly, then quickly. The radio turned on by itself, even though it was off, and started to emit a sequence of repeated numbers, 4-9-2-4. 4-9-2-4, as if it were a code. I tried to get out of there, put the car in gear and get back on the road, but the engine wouldn't respond. It was as if time hadn't yet completely turned back to allow me to leave. Then I saw, in the side mirror, someone standing next to the field. I couldn't see where it came from. It was just a tall, dark figure, completely still. It didn't come any closer, it didn't gesture. It just watched me. But the worst part was when it multiplied. From one figure, it became 2. Then 4. Each one emerging from the ground, as if they were being pulled from the earth. All the same. And all of them looking at me. The blue light was now pulsing more intensely, and I felt the air vibrate, as if I were inside a giant generator. Everything seemed to scream without making a sound. I tried to start the truck again, and this time, the engine started. But the figures didn't disappear. They just got closer. As I started to back up, the blue light dipped from the sky and disappeared into the center of the circle. At once, the figures began to fade away. Like dust being sucked up. One by one, they disappeared. The clock went back to normal. The radio went silent. And the dirt road behind me was gone. When I backed up again, I was back on I-70. I didn't understand how. Just the road in front of me. The field to the left, empty. No sign of light. No clearing. I drove until dawn, without stopping. When I found a gas station, I asked for help and told him part of what had happened. The attendant wasn't surprised. He said that from time to time, drivers would see things in the sky around there. Lights that appear and then go out. He also said that that field isn't always there. Sometimes, it just disappears. And other times, it appears miles away, but with the same clearing. The same mark on the ground. I left there with the feeling that something had led me to that place. Something that wanted me to see it. And to this day, every time I cross Kansas, I look up at the sky looking for that blue light. Hoping I'll never see it again. But knowing, deep down, that it's still waiting for me. Ever since that day, I've avoided driving through Kansas at night. But when I can't, I keep my eyes down, avoid looking at the sky. I've seen that blue light again, in the distance, slowly cutting through the clouds. And every time it happens, something goes wrong with the truck, the brakes fail, the lights burn out, the lights go out. I never stop. I never leave the road. But the feeling is always the same, as if something up there still knows exactly where I am. As if the road is just the path to something much bigger. Something that doesn't belong to this time. I've talked to other truck drivers who pass through that area, and some admit to having seen the light too. One of them said he lost an entire hour without realizing it. Another said he woke up with the truck door open, even though he had locked everything. But no one talks for long. It's like talking too much about that name for the nameless. What scares me the most is that sometimes, when the radio crackles, I hear that sequence again. 4-9-2-4, always there. As if the clearing was still calling me. As if the field was waiting for my next visit. One morning, I was cleaning the truck's dashboard and noticed something scratched with my fingernail on the plastic. An arrow. And on the side, the same number. 4924, I never wrote that down. I didn't let anyone in the cabin. But it was there. And even stranger, the digital clock flashes that number, by itself, every time I pass near that stretch of road. I've already turned it off, I've already changed the battery. It's no use. The blue light opened something. A gap. A loophole. And time didn't heal. It only brought me back to a point I never really left. So if you're ever in Kansas on an eerily quiet night and you see a blue light streak across the sky, don't follow it. Don't turn around. Don't try to understand it. Because whatever's out there may not be made for us. And if you walk into that field, time may stop for you too. But who's to say it's coming back? The night was cold and damp, typical of autumn in Massachusetts. I was heading towards Boston. It was already past 2 in the morning, when I saw the headlights stopped on the shoulder of the road. An old truck, all rusty, with faded paint and yellowed headlights, as if it had come straight out of a photo from the 60s. I slowed down and pulled over a little in front, to see if the driver needed help. But I soon noticed something strange. The engine was running, but there was no one in the cabin. The driver's door was ajar, swaying slightly in the wind. And the high beams, steady, pointing straight at the empty road. I got out with my flashlight and slowly approached. The closer I got, the more I felt an uneasiness in my chest. Not exactly fear, but a feeling that I shouldn't be there. The truck was in very good condition, considering its old look. The tires were inflated, the engine was running smoothly, but there was no sign of anyone around. When I got to the door, I saw the name painted on the driver's side, Peter Rugg, Regional Transport. It gave me goosebumps right away. Peter Rugg was a name I had heard before, in local legends, told by old truckers as if it were a joke. A man who had been driving non-stop ever since he disappeared in a storm decades ago. I looked inside the cabin. Everything looked old. Cracked leather seats, a hand-cranked radio, paper maps scattered across the dashboard. But no blood, nothing broken. Just empty. A half-full cup of coffee still warm in the holder, the engine humming steadily. It sounded like someone had just left and would be back any minute. I called out loud, walked around the truck. Nothing. No footprints in the damp dirt. And then I realized the license plate was old. Very old. A model that hadn't been used in at least 40 years. And yet it looked new. It shone like it had been installed yesterday. I decided to take a picture with my phone, but it froze. The screen went black, then it restarted by itself. When it came back on, the clock read midnight, and no matter what I did, it wouldn't update. I felt a sharp crackle in the air, like electricity. Then, the radio in my truck, which I had left off, squeaked and started playing an old song. Something like jazz from the 40s. Low, like it was coming from scratched vinyl. And at the same moment, the headlights on Peter Rugg's truck blinked twice. Then they went back to normal. His engine started to accelerate on its own, as if someone was stepping on the pedal. And the driver's door, slowly closed, by itself. The sound of the engine revving up on its own stopped me. I stood there, standing between my truck and his, unsure whether to run or wait. The music on the radio continued, but now there were voices in the background, like a muffled conversation. I tried to get closer to the cab once more, but something stopped me. A strong chill in the air, as if I had crossed a space that was too empty. I walked around, went to the back of the truck, and realized there was no cargo plate. Just an old trunk, unmarked, with hinges so old it didn't even look like it still opened. But it was locked with a brand new padlock. A modern model. Out of place. I walked back to the front, trying to convince myself that it was a prank, or that someone was trying to scare a truck driver in the middle of the night. But when I got close to the window of the driver's door, I saw something reflected in the rearview mirror. A shadow. Sitting on the seat. By reflection, I could see an old hat, hunched shoulders, hands on the steering wheel. But the cabin was still empty when looked at directly. It was as if the reflection showed what could not be seen with the naked eye. I tried to blink, to convince myself that it was fatigue, but when I looked again, the figure's eyes were fixed on me. I ran to my truck. The music stopped. The radio turned off by itself. But the name, Peter Rugg, appeared on the display for a few seconds. It wasn't a station. It was as if it were being typed there, letter by letter. I started the engine, tried to reverse, but the dashboard went crazy. Lights flashing, the speedometer showing 120 even though the truck was stopped. The engine coughed and died. I was stuck there, with the two trucks side by side, Peter's still roaring as if ready to go. And then it drove off. All by itself. Slowly, it pulled off the shoulder and into the lane, turning around with a precision impossible without someone at the wheel. He passed me slowly, headlights on, cabin apparently empty. But his rearview mirror, the side mirror, reflected my own face, looking scared, as if I were inside, driving. The back of the truck disappeared on the road, without the sound of an engine, without brake lights, as if it were gliding over the asphalt. And then, it disappeared. As if it had never existed. My truck returned to normal seconds later. The engine started, the clock updated, the radio muted. But when I looked at my own rearview mirror, there was a sentence written blurrily, as if with a finger on the glass: "You will also drive forever." Since that early morning, my life on the road has changed. I keep driving, because that's what I know how to do. But I avoid that region, that road. But sometimes, it seems like it's calling me again. The radio turns on by itself, playing the same scratchy jazz song. Or, Peter Rugg appears on the screen without me typing anything. In some stretches, I see an old truck up ahead, always in the distance, always moving forward. When I try to catch up, it disappears around a curve, at a fork, or simply disappears into the fog. And every time that happens, my watch resets to 0. Midnight, as if time there were something else. I started to write down the times and places where I saw the truck. There was a pattern. Always after 2 in the morning. Always in the emptier, older, almost forgotten stretches. As if that truck only existed where time had stopped. I researched more about Peter Rugg. There is a 19th century tale about a man who disappeared in a storm, condemned to drive forever trying to get home. The difference is that now he is driving a truck. And he seems to be looking for someone to continue the journey. As if he were tired. As if he needed to move on. I've thought that maybe I saw something I shouldn't have. Maybe I crossed a line, made a gap. I wonder if I had gotten into his truck that night, what would have happened? If I would have turned around. Or if today I would be driving alone, with someone watching me in the rearview mirror, like a figure that no longer belongs anywhere. The road is long, and every curve reminds me that there is something waiting on the dark asphalt. Something that keeps moving, even if no one sees it. So, if one morning you come across an old truck on the side of the road, engine running, cabin empty, don't stop. Don't get close. Don't look in the mirror. Because if it's reflecting someone, it could be you. And Peter Rugg's road will never let you go back.